Well, hey, parents, welcome to week 2 of relationship goals. I'm Liam, the students director at Ashland Ridge Church. I just kind of want to give you a rundown on what we're talking about this week at AR Students, just so you're aware of it, just so that your students don't come home and give you some shocking questions and blow your mind, all that kind of stuff. Just want you to be prepared as we continue in this series about relationships and about what God's dream for us, for our relationships, really is. Again, last week we had our very first week of relationship goals where we set up the whole concept of having goals over rules and how rules don't really work out most of the time, but goals always will. And we also told our students that God has this awesome vision for their relationships, one that is joy-filled, one that's loving, one that honors God, one that puts Jesus at the center. And the bottom line was that God's intention for our relationships is really simple. He just wants us to honor him, honor God, follow Jesus, and put the other person first. It's really that simple. Those were the three things we talked about last week. We talked about that a bunch in small groups. And this week, we're taking it another step into what relationships could look like right now. And this is the week where we are going to talk about the reality that some relationships go too far. Some relationships go too far too early. And God's timeline for our relationships means that all the really good stuff that comes from relationships, whether it's sex or full spiritual intimacy and full emotional dependency, all of those things happen so much later in the relationship's timeline than any middle school or high school student's going to get to while they're in middle school or high school. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about this week. We are going to talk a little bit about how if you make your relationship all about the physical aspects of it, it's going to fail. We're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about how emotional dependence and being emotionally tied to a person too quickly, too early, can also lead to a relationship that burns you, that ends up causing more damage than giving any benefit. And so don't worry, we're not only talking about the sex this week. We're not only talking about, the lines that our students are going to flirt with. It's just the reality of being a middle school and high school student. You know, you were there. We're also going to talk about that emotional piece because it's impossible to separate physicality from the emotional side of things, right? And you know this from your own relationships. There's no way that you can totally pull apart the way that humans interact physically and the way they interact relationally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how important it is to not be mastered by anything. We're going to use this one verse from 1 Corinthians. I'll read it to you. It's 1 Corinthians 6:12, and this is Paul saying, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial, right? I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. This idea of not being mastered by anything is so important because that applies not just to the physical side of relationships, right? You don't want to be mastered by the emotional side of relationships. And it goes beyond just relationships too, right? In our world, in our culture, people get mastered, people get obsessed, people get addicted, people get drawn into all kinds of things that sometimes people think are good, like work or making money or building your future. Like those things we like to think are really great. But if we're being mastered by them, if they're controlling our every move, our every thought, our every behavior on a day-to-day basis, then that's not what God intends for us, right? Even the good things. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about, hey, there's some good that comes from relationships. Sex is a good thing. God gave us the gift of sex. It's fantastic, but if it's not in the right context, if it's not in the right space, you're going to be mastered by it. You're going to be mastered by the concept, the need, the draw for that physical relationships. And then on the flip side of that, even if you're not necessarily in that overly physical boat, you can still learn from this. You can still learn that being mastered by something, being mastered by a relationship, isn't what God intends for us. And in reality, it's not what we want for us either. Like, we don't want to be slaves to anything, right? We don't want that reality, that pressure, that constant need to satisfy a craving in ourselves or in someone else. We don't want that. And so it's really convenient that God doesn't want that either. And that's the beautiful part, is that so many of these things that our relationships, our goals for relationships are built on, are things that are written on our hearts by God and are just common to humans. We all feel this way. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about this week. We are going to separate middle school and high school's small group questions. You have those in your email down below. If you scroll down to the bottom, you should be able to see them. And as usual, if you have any questions, please let me know. Please, please, please let me know. I'm really excited about this. We don't really know what the weather's going to look like for this Sunday for Valentine's Day. And so if we have to move it back a week, we will, because that's that important. We're not going to miss it. So we love you. Thank you so much for making our students and Asher Ridge Church on Sunday mornings a priority for you and your families. It really shows in your students the fact that you're willing to put this experience for them first. And in reality, you're modeling so much of what it means to follow Jesus by making sure that they get that community piece, especially right now when community is kind of a scarce commodity, right? Like with the way school and our lives are, like finding community is not a foregone conclusion anymore. It never was, but it's really obvious that it's not now. So thank you so much for partnering with us, joining us on this journey, and making our students a priority. And we will see you this Sunday morning. And if we don't, we'll see you the next one, because we're not going anywhere. You can't escape relationship goals. It's coming. It's coming. We love you guys. Can't wait to see you. Y'all take care.